Great. So my name is Juliana. I use she, her pronouns, and I am manager of leadership development here at Matriculate. So I've been here since 2019, and my role has evolved a bit over time, but my favorite part of the work is really getting to know our student leaders and supporting them in their journeys with our organization and getting to, build relationships with you all and support you as student leaders and also just with all the great and many things that our students are often doing. But yeah, I'm just really excited to talk through this leadership application. One of my biggest passions when we talk about leadership is trying to reduce barriers to leadership. So I really, if you have the passion and the interest in becoming a leader with Matriculate, you're qualified to do so. So if anybody has any concerns or anxieties about that, let's try to surface those if we can, so we can just talk through that and provide any encouragement that we can. Yeah, and then my email's up here. You can feel free to email me at any time if you want to set up a one-on-one conversation after this, talk through stuff. Just, I'm here as a resource. So I'll turn it over to Annabelle.
Hello, everyone. My name's Annabelle. I'm an associate on the recruitment team, but before that, my history with Matriculate is quite extensive. I was an advising fellow for all my 4 years throughout college at Emory, and was part of the advising fellow leadership team and national advising fellow leadership team member as well. So I have a lot of experience with Matriculate and I'm happy to answer any and all questions you have, whether they're related to leadership positions or not. I think it's really special. Being a leader with Matriculate is very special, and I think seeing students step into those roles is always incredible. And just like Juliana said, if you guys have like any desire or inkling to apply to a leadership position and you have any hesitations about like, oh, am I qualified enough? I assure you that you are. So please just like bring those to the space so we can talk through any and all questions or hesitations you have.
Fabulous. So today's agenda, first we're going to do an overview of all of the roles that Matriculate has open right now for leadership. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the application itself and what the application process looks like, what to expect. And then we'll do some question and answer. You can, with me, but also with Annabelle. She has a lot of amazing experience, as she just said, as a student leader. So we'll do that, and then we'll wrap up with any closing and questions. But as I said, throughout the duration, use the chat, raise your hand, ask any questions that you have. I'm just curious, before we start talking about the roles, has anybody started their eligibility form or application yet? Can I get like maybe a little reaction if you have, or like thumbs up if yes, thumbs down if no? Okay, cool. Okay, cool, awesome. So people have already started that. That's great. And if you haven't, that's also great too. I just kind of wanted to get a sense because I don't want to give like too much redundant information if you were all already started your application. So now we're going to talk about the application process. So our applications are due on April 2nd. And the first step is that eligibility form. So this is a very short form. It's just to make sure that everybody who's going through the work and time of completing an application is only doing so for positions that they can actually have. So to be eligible, you need to be enrolled as an undergraduate, and the head advising fellow role is a 2-year role. So that means it is not open to seniors. So if you are going to be a freshman, sophomore, junior at the start of the year next year, then you are eligible to apply to HAF. And NAFLT and AFLT are 1-year positions. So if you are a senior, I really recommend the AFLT role. That's open to all class years. And then the only role that has a little bit of additional qualification is NAFLT, or National Advising Fellow Leadership Team, it's called, and we'll go through all the acronyms on the later slides. That is only open to students who have prior leadership experience. And then You also need to be a current advising fellow. If you are somebody who just submitted your application and you haven't gone through training yet, that's fine. You're eligible to apply, but you have to be like currently in the advising fellow process. And then you have to be able to receive legal compensation in the US. So all of our leadership positions do receive a paid stipend. And if you have questions about, for some of our international students, about like the nuance of your visa or things like that, feel free to stay after this call or just shoot us an email because, everyone's situation is different. Annabelle, do you want to talk a little about the application?
Absolutely. So this year we have a universal application. So there's a few short answer questions that, regardless of which position you're specifically applying for, you'll fill out the same application. And those questions focus on leadership, organizational, and interpersonal skills. That's really how like the rubric that we use um, is broken down. And throughout all parts, and we'll say this a lot, it'll come up later in our presentation as well, we emphasize skill potential rather than actually having demonstrated the skills like 100%. So that's both in the application and the interview process. We're not looking for you to come into these leadership positions with like 10 different leadership experiences and you have amazing and super leadership skills and organizational skills and time management skills. We really just want to see the potential for those skills. And that's something that you can demonstrate through various examples. And that's what we're evaluating for. So if you don't have a lot of experience, please do not worry. That's not something that is a prerequisite to applying to these positions.
Awesome. And if you're not sure what role that you want to apply for, I recommend it's pretty easy to apply to multiple roles in the same application. And especially, this is a much smaller pool of students than the hundreds of people that apply for advising fellowship. So if you're not sure and you want to apply to multiple roles and then throughout the process, I think sometimes just going through those interviews can help you realize what is a good fit for you. So if you start interested in one and then you want to move over to another one, that's something that happens every year. And also, too, sometimes, there's a section on the application that says, I agree to be considered for other roles. So we kind of look at leadership teams from a holistic perspective because you work very closely with other leaders from your fellowship. So just know that there's like some fluidity between the roles. So the last part of the application, this is not a separate part, but it's the last section. It's a performance task. And this is an opportunity to just share how you might approach a common challenge that you would face as a leader. It's also just as much um, a chance for you to see like lived in example of what the work is like for matriculate leaders, excuse me. So I think that's a good chance for you as you work on the task to reflect, is this something I could see myself enjoy doing? Is this something that I feel is like a good use of my time, something that excites me? So it's also kind of a good opportunity for you to see, get a taste of the role. And then after you submit your application, it will be reviewed and then you'll be contacted for an interview that will either be conducted with a matriculate student with leadership experience or a member of matriculate staff. And it's really, our interviews are pretty, I think, simple in terms of the type of questions that we're asking. It's a lot of just expanding on your application, getting to know you more, also getting a sense of like your availability, and just like why you're interested in leadership. Also, I recommend for everybody to come prepared with your questions. I always am really grateful when I see students that, have reflected on the roles and come with their questions. And even sometimes when people push us a bit, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any questions about the application process? Cool. We can move on. So Annabelle already spoke about this, so I don't know if you want to just run through our skills here.
Absolutely. So this is exactly how our rubric. Oh, we actually have a question in the chat before I went to. So for the AFLT and NAFLT, you need previous leadership experience. So you only need previous leadership experience for the National Advising Fellow Leadership Team. but you do not need it for AFLT.
Sorry, I didn't mean for my reply to go in caps.
So add some character. Yes. So for what we look for in our leaders, this is how our rubric is broken down just for transparency purposes. So these are exactly the skills that we're looking for and kind of evaluating you on as we work through your application and your interview. And once again, we really want to put the emphasis on skill potential and not you being an expert in all of these skills and all of these subsections. So roughly, we're looking for leadership skills, organizational and interpersonal skills, and you can kind of see what the subsections of each of those grand categories are. I won't read through it because I think that's a little bit redundant. Um, but really keep these in mind as you're working through your application. You can have this like slideshow pulled up on the side and thinking a little more critically and reflecting as you're going through your application responses, and thinking about, oh, how am I demonstrating leadership? How am I demonstrating my prioritization skills? Or how am I demonstrating an example of when I worked collaboratively with a team? And again, we really want you to focus on, and what we focus on is skill potential and the in your interest in growing as a leader during your time at Matriculate, rather than coming into the roles with like fully fleshed out skills for all three of these categories. I'll give you guys some time to just like read through them. And if you have any questions about like any of these skills specifically, or if you want me to elaborate a little bit on how we go through like reviewing applications, feel free to unmute or just drop questions in the chat as well.
And as Annabelle said, like this, when you start your application, there's a link to these skills on the application page. So we try to make it as transparent as possible. I'm sure we can always still be more transparent, but this is what we'll be looking at. So these are the points that could be great to speak to.
Any questions on any of that?
Cool.
Great.
So now we're going to talk through, oh, I see. Yes. So we had a great question. I'll just read it out for the recording. So could you please talk about the operations part in the organization section? Yeah, so Annabelle, while I'm talking, if you want to pull up the rubric, we can also just read it verbatim. But yeah, we think of, Matriculate uses a lot of different systems for our roles. And for, tracking the progress of our high school fellows, for doing, data analysis and outreach and things like that. So it's really just looking at, if in terms of organization, if people have experience or, a desire to learn, management, data systems, things like that.
And I just copied in the language from the rubric directly.
Yeah, and so I'll read this out for the recording. So, thinking through and implementing systems for organization that allow you to keep track of different tasks, goals, and individuals, and then comfortable using data and tracking to evaluate performance. So that could be something as simple as, we look at data for, a high school fellow survey. So for our high school students, if they took a survey and, there's a large number of students that don't feel comfortable reaching out to their advisor, for example, that, you're able to like read the results of that survey and, come up with some goals and strategies that maybe we can use to improve our program. Fabulous question, though. So now head advising fellow, or HAF as we call them. So our head advising fellow role again is a 2-year role. It's about 8 to 10 hours per week, and I'm just going to talk through the role in terms of seasons. If anybody wants to get more, down in the details, we have some other documents, roadmaps we can share if that's helpful. So just let us know. But for a more larger scale overview, so your first year, you'll do some training in the summer, and then you will do The role will really gear up in the fall of your first year. So in the first aspect of the head advising fellow role is recruiting and selecting a new group of advising fellows. So you will do things like conducting outreach, reviewing applications. You will, build relationships with other organizations on campus. It's a lot of kind of like, grassroots communications work. And you'll also have your team. So you're, as a head advising fellow, you'll be managing a group of AFLT or advising fellow leadership team members. Your whole leadership team will be between like 4 to 7 students ish, depending on the size of your school and the fellowship. And you'll all work really closely together to like recruit and select a new group of advisors. Then, after recruitment's done, these new advisors will go through training and certification. So for many of you, that's the period that you're in right now. So you'll help support training your new advisors, helping them just work through every step of the process to become comfortable so they can actually meet their high schoolers. Then we'll start pairing your advisors with high schoolers, and you'll just really be supporting your fellowship in terms of like building community with each other, and also just getting comfortable with the actual advising role. Then over the summer, it's more of a step back. We recognize that, people have a lot of different plans over the summers. People are traveling, people are resting, people have jobs, um, people have family responsibilities. So you'll still just be tracking and supporting your advising fellows over the summer. And then your second year, second year fall, that's going to be a really important time for your advisors and their students because they'll be finalizing their, college list, finalizing their applications and sending in those applications. So you'll be a lot of supporting your students with that. And then in the spring, this is, decision time. So you'll support your students with college decisions, college enrollments, and transitioning your advisors out of the role and transitioning high schoolers out of high school. You'll also be supporting the new advisors that are coming in because every year there are new advisors and new leaders coming in. And then there's a final celebration at the end of the year. So I know this is a lot of information. You can find a lot of this on the position description, which I don't know if Annabelle, you want to throw that in the chat for each of these roles as we go along. Yeah, but does anybody have any questions about this overview? Cool. For the sake of time, we'll move on. Annabelle, would you like to talk through AFLT position?
Absolutely. So the AFLT position is a bit more straightforward in the sense that it's a 1-year position. So going over the overview is a bit more succinct. So you'll start kind of with the same timeline as you're working in your first year as an HAF. You're working directly with AFLT members, as Juliana mentioned. So those timelines really overlap quite a lot. So in the fall, so that's August to November, you're focusing on recruitment for the incoming class of advisors. And that's really where the bulk of your time is being dedicated. So whether that be coming up with weekly recruitment plans during your weekly team meetings and implementing those recruitment strategies to conducting one-on-one outreach to your assigned advising fellow candidates. And then later on in the fall, so around November, reviewing applications, interviewing AF candidates, and then ultimately selecting who that new cohort is going to be comprised of. So that takes up the bulk of your fall. It's really just recruitment focused. And that's where like everyone's efforts, whether that be staff or student leaders, is really focused towards. Then we move on into training, which will take up the bulk of your time between November and February. So you've gone ahead, recruited this great group of advising fellows. Now it's time to train them. So you'll walk them through online training. There'll be the in-person trainings, the live trainings, which you will help facilitate along with your head advising fellows. And then after everyone goes through training, your focus shifts to getting them certified to become advising fellows. So you'll conduct a lot of ACEs, which is just our certification process, and then get the chance to connect with your HAF to kind of make sure you're hitting those milestones as they come up. And then later in the spring, as you are, you kind of finish up conducting all your ACEs, making sure that the group of students that advisors that you're responsible for are all completing their certification in a timely manner. And then that is really where your time as AFLT kind of stops. So that'll be looking like late April. You'll help update the content for your fellowship's recruitment handbook. And what that is just kind of a great resource of what works on our fellowship, what doesn't, what permissions do we have to get to table, information like that, that is passed down between leadership teams so that it makes the next year's recruitment and certification cycle a bit easier. So during your last couple like months as an AFLT member, you'll help contribute to that handbook, and then you sign off, and that's where your time as a leader will come to an end, unfortunately. But yeah, any questions about any of the AFLT information? And I'll also share the position description in the chat. And I know this is a lot of information to kind of go through and internalize. So you're all, please take the time to look through the position description, like circle back to this presentation, and if anything comes up, you can just shoot us a quick email.
Awesome. So now we're going to talk about NAFLT. This is the only role that is, as we said before, open to students that have prior leadership experience. And that's because this role is very much focused on supporting new fellowships. So it's kind of like near peer mentorship, but at the college matriculate leader level. So every year not every year, but most years, we're going to be opening at new campuses and universities across the country. And so we'll pair up a student from a returning matriculate fellowship with a student who is launching at a new partner school for us. And so they will work with those students over the course of a year. They will, support them. They'll meet with them on a weekly basis. And then they'll just support Matriculate's growth on a national scale. And then once recruitment ends, there are opportunities to participate in program design projects. So again, focus more on the program's growth at a national level. And I don't think that anybody on this call is eligible for NAFLT, so that's why I went through it at like a bit of a quicker speed. But NAFLT is a really great role once you have leadership experience to return to. And I think the students get a lot out of it, and we certainly get a lot out of it too. So I definitely recommend, it's not like you have to choose one role and then that's your leadership role and that's all that you do. We have a lot of people that do one role and then another one. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And also, a lot of our seniors that want to stay involved, this is a great way for them to do so. So, HAF training. A really awesome opportunity that I definitely want to highlight for our leaders is for our head advising fellows. We do a weekend-long in-person training retreat in New York City. All expenses are paid by Matriculate, and it's an opportunity to connect with Matriculate leaders from all across the country, from all of our different campuses. So, we'll have a bunch of different sessions, we'll have food, we'll have different activities for people to do in their free time in the city. And it's a great opportunity to just work on your leadership skills, to get prepared for everything ahead in the role. And as a head advising fellow, since it's a 2-year position, you get to go twice. So then I think that also helps people kind of, break down the role into more manageable pieces. So that's that year 1 summer and year 2 summer. And then those are the kind of big training moments where there's like a full weekend devoted to training. Then in the spring, once you stop with recruitment, we'll have there's not another training retreat, but there are, additional training opportunities. And then just throughout the role, you'll have opportunities to connect with head advising fellows of other schools, There's opportunities sometimes to travel to some of Matriculate's other campuses. And there's just a lot of opportunities to continue your training. It's also just a really cool community to be a part of. You know, we have students that are interested in like every academic discipline, from all different backgrounds and walks of life, doing, you know, all with a really, really diverse array of goals for their future. So I love just seeing people like bond at training and build friendships and see those friendships continue to grow over the years. Um, cool. Annabelle, what do you want to talk about this one?
Absolutely. So, really, something we want to highlight with AFL and like becoming a leader, it can be really intimidating and stressful to think about, like, oh, I'm going to be a leader of this cohort or I'm going to help recruit this cohort. But we do all that we can to make sure that you have a lot of support systems along the way. And you have direct connections with staff, but also um, the chance to connect with other student leaders at different fellowships to kind of lean on for support, go to them with any questions you have, etc. So there's a lot of different resources that we have that we provide to our student leaders and also a lot of different avenues for collaboration. So just to name a few, HAFs have weekly one-on-ones with a full-time staff member where you're able to talk through kind of recruitment strategies for that week, receive continued coaching and feedback that's really essential to professional development and just feeling like you have a staff member that you can lean on for support at any time. They're all AFL calls, which we do at this point, we're doing bi-weekly, um, and also Slack channels where you can kind of reach out to different leaders from different fellowships and ask for their input and feedback, or also just a place to kind of vent and share funny memes. That's been a big highlight of her Slack channel this year. There's weekly AFLT meetings where HAFs and AFLT are coming together to collaborate in that space and come up with recruitment strategies, etc. So there really are a lot of opportunities to collaborate not only with other leaders, but also with matriculate staff, which I think is very special. And we do provide a bunch of different resources, um, whether that be guidance on our specific policies, redirecting students with extenuating circumstances to staff so we can kind of help you drive through those situations and navigate through those situations. Many different resource hubs and continued training, which Juliana already touched on and talked about a bit. And I think most importantly, and something that a lot of our student leaders are interested in, is professional development. We really try to do what we can to help develop those skills one-on-one when we meet with our student leaders, but also staff is always here as a point of support for any career advice you need, any references or letters of recommendation. Staff is truly like in your corner and we will be your biggest fans and advocates. So I think that's something really special about being a leader is that you get to develop those close relationships with staff and kind of use those in your own professional or like academic opportunities outside of matriculate as well. Any questions about any of this?
Cool. So here are the different opportunities for continued learning and support that exist for our leaders. So we have online leadership training modules that are pretty similar in structure to what you did for the advising fellow role. So all of our positions have these trainings that you can refer back to as a resource. For our head advising fellows and NAFLT, they have that opportunity that I mentioned to go to New York City. For NAFLT, they'll go once because it's a 1-year role. For HAFs, they'll go twice because it's a 2-year role. To travel to New York for that weekend of workshops. Every fellowship, every leadership team is paired with a staff member. So, for example, 2 of the campuses I worked with this past year were Emory and Notre Dame. So I had weekly meetings with leaders at those campuses to see how things were going for them, support them with questions that they were having, and really try to make sure that they're getting what they want to get out of this experience. We also have a ton of resources. Some may say too many. all types of different templates and things that can support you. We have a lot of different surveys that we do, and that really helps us. So you have a lot of opportunities to give feedback of like what's working, what isn't working, and we modify the program on a pretty like fast pace. So the feedback you give one month could inform the resources we give you the next month. So I want to be mindful of time. I want to make sure that we have at least 15 minutes to talk through the Q&A with Annabelle and any of your questions. So the main point of the slide is to just show that all of these positions work together. So at each fellowship, there could be maybe there will be 1 to 2 head advising fellows and 2 to 5 advising fellow leadership team members. And then in total, there will be like between 4 and 7 national leadership team students. So the point of this slide is just to show that you're all working together towards goals. Regardless of your role, there's relationships across these positions and a lot of collaboration. I'll maybe just give people a few minutes to read this. Annabelle, do you have anything to add on this slide before we just have some time to review?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty comprehensive.
Cool. Cool. So now, I say let's open it up for some questions that you all have. And then if there aren't any specific questions, I can kind of generate some possible questions maybe by asking Annabelle to share a little bit about her experience. But I'd love to hear this could be anything about the application process, the application portal, the different roles, balancing it with, your student schedule. Truly any questions that you have. So let's take a few minutes. And I would love to hear what you're all thinking. And you can throw those in the chat or unmute. No questions? Did we just hit it out of the park that much? It was just so clear. Or hopefully people aren't thinking, oh. Or maybe people are thinking, I don't want to apply anymore. I hope that's not the case. But if it is, that's good because that means we gave you information that helped you make it in more informed decisions. No questions at the moment. Reassurance that you focus on skill potential is really helpful. I was a little nervous about pursuing applications at first. It's made me feel more secure. That makes me so happy to hear. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. I really appreciate it. That's definitely, one of our biggest things. We see a lot of students that maybe like take themselves out of consideration because of feeling that, they're don't have as much experience, but it's like every year we have a ton of first years that apply. We have a ton of first year advisors apply. We have a ton of people who never had a leadership position in high school or college before. And I say that's all the more reason to get involved. So please don't let that hold you back. So I'm really glad that this provided some helpful reassurance and information. Um, cool. Annabelle, maybe before we end, I maybe you could share like um something that was rewarding about the role,
Mhm.
and maybe something that was challenging. And then also, I don't know if you have any like things you know now that you wish you knew when you applied.
I think I'll start with challenging so we can get the challenges out of the way first. I think the biggest thing for me was I went into the role not really having talked to any previous leaders or not having a really good understanding of what the time commitment was going to look like. Slash, when I applied for AFLT, I didn't know the like future commitments that I was going to have. So it was my busiest semester. I think like that first fall in the role was definitely my busiest semester of college. So time management was something that I definitely a challenge and something I struggled with significantly in the start. But I think that's also something that Matriculate and being a leader at my campus gave me the chance to work on a lot. I think I developed really great time management skills, really great prioritization skills that have still stuck with me to this day. Um, which granted, like, could I go back? I probably would have started my time management a little earlier rather than it being a consequence of the role. But I definitely think that's a skill you will definitely develop within a leadership role just because of the way the program is structured and the busy periods kind of come in different like ways. Um, but the most rewarding part, I think, was definitely building the cohort and being able to recruit the incoming class of advisors. It was always really special to get to connect with advisors one on one, review applications, conduct interviews, but also just have like coffee chats and talk to them about my experience as an advising fellow, and then to get to see them apply and go on to actually advise their own students. That was something that was super um, special and rewarding, and something I still obviously enjoy as part of staff. And I guess the side effect of being a leader at Emory, my year, we had just a really strong leadership team. And I don't even mean that like quality, like recruitment quality wise, but just we all got along very well. So I think the happy side effect of being an AFLT member was I met some of my closest friends through Matriculate and through people who I still talk to regularly to this day. So I think getting to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't have connected with was something that was really special about my leadership experience. And then what I know now that I wish I knew then, um, that it's all going to be okay. I think sometimes when you're in those leadership roles, like every milestone, every goal, every deadline can seem like this big unachievable thing or something where like if you don't hit your numbers or your targets exactly, like the whole world is going to fall apart and crumble. And that's really not the case. I think looking back, we were always able to work through any challenges as a team, and we always had really great support from staff whenever we were navigating a hard situation. So just remembering that, like, it may seem super stressful and like super do or die in that moment, but in the grand scheme of things, like, it's okay. Just be able to take a step back, talk to your team, bring your concerns to staff because we're really the ones who are here to deal with like that bulk of like that stress for you and help it kind of disappear rather than you just taking that on your own, and kind of like not suffering in silence but trying to like work through it on your own. So yeah.
That was beautifully said, Annabelle. Um,
Thanks.
yeah, I hope that that's helpful for people to hear. And I also recommend, I always say this to reach out to the leaders from your own fellowship. If you do not know how to contact them, let me know. Let Annabelle know, and we're happy to put you in touch. Hopefully,
Mhm.
at this point, you all know who they are and how to reach them, because they can really talk to what it's like to, balance the leadership role with the student schedule. And they're doing it right now. So I
Yeah.
really recommend that. So Our application is due on April 2nd. We will be accepting applications on a rolling basis. So if you submit your application sooner than April 2nd, it's possible that you could get an interview sooner.
Mhm.
So, you know, um, that is the deadline. And we can, um, Annabelle, if you go on that first slide from the PowerPoint, if you want to maybe just throw the link to the application in this chat, and then we can also put my Calendly in there, um,
Absolutely.
and maybe our emails. But if you have any other questions throughout the process, we are here to help. So there's the link to the application in the chat. Um, and then also Annabelle's going to put our Calendlys in the chat. And if you want to sign up for a short 30-minute meeting or 20-minute meeting with us, just to talk through any additional questions or thoughts that you have, you can feel free to do that. And then our leadership training will begin in July. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. But if you have anything that you need, we'll all hang out for a few minutes for any additional questions. And otherwise, I'll put. Oh my gosh, Annabelle's in it all. We love her. Yeah,
The
thank you for
typing
coming.
speed.
I really hope that you will all apply. And we really appreciate your time.
Thank you guys.